Hello, it's Gail here from Three Wise Crafters and welcome back to my channel. In today's video I'm using Altenew products Dynamic Duo Floral Whimsy. This is the outline stamp set that coordinates with the stencils. I'm also using the Tufted Elegance 3D embossing folder and some inks from the Ocean Dreams Fresh Dye ink range. I have my Wendy Vecchi Make Art Station here. And this stencil set consists of 2 layering stencils. If you haven't used Altenew products before, they always include a guide inside as well as some colour suggestions. So I'm using Hammermill Premium Copy Colour paper and I've just put some removable adhesive on that. And I use the Express It removable adhesive. So I've got my first stencil down and I'm just using some low tack tape here that I get off the internet and just masking off the side there so that we don't get ink. So there's 2 areas on this stencil that I also need to mask off that are the flower centers, and you can see me doing that here now. So the first ink that we're using is called Berry Cool and I'm just applying that over all of the flowers. And I've sped up the video just to make it quicker for you. So the next colour that I'm doing is called Ride the Wave. And it's a darker blue, but it's sort of on top of the Berry Cool. It becomes more of a sky blue. So if you find the speed too fast, you can go into your settings on YouTube and you can alter the speed of your video as well as the quality. So YouTube puts all their videos at standard definition and you can change it to high definition in the settings. And it does change the quality of the videos, so I do recommend that you do that whenever you're watching any YouTube videos. So here I'm just going in with a smaller brush just to add some detail around the inside of the flowers closer to the flower center. And that just creates some shading on our flowers. And here I'm just using some paper to mask off areas where I don't want the blue to go. And I needed a couple bits of paper here so I could mask off 2 areas. And you can do that with paper or you can do that with low adhesive tape, but your tape will have trouble sticking to any ink that's on your stencil, so you would need to clean that off first or mask off the area before you did it. So here I'm just taking the stencil off, and to clean my stencil I just use rubbing alcohol, and the isocol is from my local supermarket here in Australia. So here I'm lining up the second stencil. I thought that it would line up with the corner of the cardstock like the first, but it's actually off a little bit, which you can see to the left hand side that it doesn't line up perfectly. So here I'm just masking off all the leaves so that I can apply the colour to our flower petals. Now I've cut out a bit of that because I didn't think that you needed to see it. So here I've gone back in with the Berry Cool ink and applying that to the flower centers. So this is really quick and easy to do, and you can do it in any colors. You can do these petals in a different color to the first stencil and you'll create a completely different effect. Stencils are a lot of fun to use and they can provide a lot of versatility with what you do. So you could have created this as a 1-layer card instead of multiple layers, and it would just look as pretty as what a multi-layered card does. So if you haven't used stencils before, I highly recommend them. It's a quick way of making a card if you need one. So here I'm just rubbing off the ink that's sitting there on top because I wanted to go back in with the Berry Cool just to add some extra colour to the outside of the flower petals. I had noticed that it looked a little bit more pale to white when I was looking at it, so I just wanted to add a bit more colour. And just as long as you clean off your stencil if you're applying a lighter colour ink, and then you won't contaminate the colour of that you're applying to your stencil. So here I'm just taking off that tape and masking off the flower areas, and I've cut out that bit so you didn't need to watch me doing all of that masking, but you can mask off any area that you want. So now I'm just using Let Us Celebrate, which is a vibrant green colour when you apply it, but you can get different tones with it very easy just by adding some extra ink or a heavier hand when you're applying that ink. So once I've done that, I've gone in with the Ride the Wave ink just to add some different colour and definition to our leaves of our flowers. So I just go back and add more ink where I think I need it. And you'll see here, once I finish this leaf, that I go to take the stencil off because I thought I had finished. But you'll notice on the far left hand side that there's a leaf there that I've missed. So it's easy to go back in and just line up your stencils again. And you can do this with any area that you miss or if you need to apply more ink. So there I've done that. And now I'm going to do the flower centers. And there's 3 flower centers with this particular stencil area. And it's really easy just to lay this on top and apply it. So for the first layer of ink, I have done buttercream, and then I've just added some warm sunshine to add some texture to and definition shadow areas to it. But you don't need to do a second ink color. When you apply your stamped outline images to the flowers and the flower centers, it makes no difference really to the finished flower. So you can save yourself time and just use one ink color. So I really enjoy stenciling. I'm interested to know if this is something that you yourself enjoy, and what sort of techniques do you like doing with your stencils. So here we're going to apply some ink color to the bigger flower, and this has 2 stencil components to it. So it has the large one that we're going to do first, and we're doing that in buttercream. So leave me a comment below about what you like doing with your stencils and what other card making techniques do you like. And the second colour that we're doing is Warm Sunshine. So once we've finished those, we can move on to the last flower centre. And again, I'm just applying the same inks, Buttercream and Warm Sunshine. And they are from Altenew's Crisp Dye ink range, which Altenew has stopped making the crisp dye inks. You may or may not be able to pick these up at your local craft store, but you would be able to find similar colours in your inks that you have at home. And I suggest that you use the inks that you have. You don't need to go and buy all the other products that are out there unless you have full set syndrome, which unfortunately I do with my inks. So here I trimmed down my cardstock just so that it would fit into my Misty, and I'm using the 6x8 inch Misty here, and I'm just lining up the stamps with the correct image. And this is really easy to do. I think the hardest bit that I had was the leaves, and it doesn't matter if they're not perfect because of the stenciling and the flower type and all that sort of thing. It doesn't matter if they're off a bit. It just gives the flowers and the leaves a different look. So here I've got that in and just realigning my paper, and I'm using the VersaFine Onyx Black ink here. I prefer to use this ink. It's really good for fine detail, and I didn't condition these stamps before I used them, so I just need to go back in and stamp it again in some areas. But if you conditioned your stamps, you probably wouldn't need to. So I just used a Lawn Fawn chamois to clean my stamps, and I've lined up the next layer of stamps. So it takes 3 passes to do all of your stamping and changing where the positions are, but it doesn't take long to do, and as I said, they're really easy to line up. So once we're finished that, there is a add-on die that will cut all of these pieces out in one pass. I don't have it, so I had to use scissors, and I did all the cutting off screen so that you didn't have to watch me here and do fussy cutting. So now I'm doing the Tufted Elegance 3D embossing folder, and I'm applying some Lawn Fawn Yeti pigment ink to the top of my embossing folder. And this is just so that that ink will go onto the cardstock when we run the embossing folder through our die cutting machine. And I'm just applying that several times just to try and get coverage. I had trouble getting it towards the top of the embossing folder. So the cardstock I'm using here is Pacific Point from Stamping Up. I have a lot of Stamping Up cardstock in my range from years ago when I was a demonstrator. So here I'm using the Sizzix Big Shot Switch Plus. I just find it's easier to use an electric die cutting machine at the moment. I have a lot of trouble running it through my Spellbinders, and it was much easier for me to do it. So here you've seen what it looked like coming out of the embossing folder, and that ink will dry back. I've just cut it down to size a bit as well. I didn't have an appropriate sentiment that I wanted to use, and I wanted to have a thank you card. So I'm actually using Pink Rose Thank You Layered Metal die here. So I'm just using some scrap cardstock from the Hammermill from all of the fussing cutting. So it's a good idea to keep all of these little scraps. You never know when you can use it, and it just saves cutting up another piece of paper from your cardstock stash, and it puts good use to those scraps. So here, this is just an offcut of gold foil that I have, and I don't even know where that gold foil came from. I think it's something I've had in my paper stash for years and years and years. So here I've die cut them all out. I've done the shadow layer as well as the thin sentiment, and it looks really effective in the gold. I wasn't too sure about the shadow layer, but we'll see what we do with that a bit later. So here you can see the shadow layer, and once I've taken off the die, I'll show you what that looks like when the sentiment is placed on top of the shadow layer. So shadow layers are a good thing, but sometimes you don't need them. Sometimes it doesn't work with the card that you're making. And I had a feeling that there might be too much white for the card that I was trying today. So the base that I'm using on my card is a Neenah Solar White 110 pound. So I've stuck that down with double-sided tape and some glue from Gina K Design. So here I'm just using some foam squares to add dimension to our flowers. And sometimes I've used 1 square or I've used 2. And this is because these are very thin foam squares. They're a 0.04 of an inch or a 1 mil thick foam square. So I just wanted to have different dimensions on my card, and I thought that using either 1 or 2 created that dimensional look I was going for. Now I've also added some Gina K Connect glue here just because the background was at different levels and I was a bit worried that it wouldn't stick. I forgot to do that with the 2 large flowers, but when I tried to remove those it didn't make any difference. So you'll see me apply the glue on all the remaining pieces. Now what I did off camera was I tried multiple layouts of how I liked the flowers with the sentiment, and then I took a picture on my phone and I used that as my reference here while I'm laying down all of our flower and leaf components. So I suggest that you do that. If you're not sure on the layout, just do different layouts, take a picture of them on your phone and have a look and see which one you like best. And then if you need to have a break or anything, you've got a reference to come back to as well. And I think this probably took some time. Yes, it did take time to do all the stenciling, but trying to work out the layout was a bit time consuming for me, and trying to work out where I wanted the sentiment. I did try the sentiment in the center and have the flowers and leaves up the top and the bottom, but I didn't really like that. So when you see the finished card, I am really happy with how it looks, and I hope you are too. So just keep trying and rearranging things until you get that perfect look that you're going for. So some of these flowers and leaves I just glued straight to the card base, and that just created that 3-layer dimension with our card. And some of it I ended up changing around as well as I went. And it's a good idea to have some of your leaves at the front with some of your flowers behind it, because that's what it would look like in nature. So I quite liked that as it is just there on screen now, and I could have left all the flowers as is, but as I didn't really want any remaining pieces, I decided to use them all up on this card. So I'm not sure how you do your card layouts and how you work out where you're putting your pieces. Feel free to leave me a comment below, and let me know. Do you struggle with the placement of where you're going to put your elements on your card? And how do you work out what colors you're going to use? I'm not very good with color combinations, so I tend to use coordinating inks from different companies, with Altenew actually being one of my favorite. So we've nearly finished laying down all these pieces. We've got one more to go and then we're finished. So once this is done, we'll move on to our sentiment. So here I've just lining up the sentiment on the shadow and placing that down on the card base just to see how I liked it. And I thought it was too much white for the rest of the colours of our card. So then I removed the shadow layer and just did the thin sentiment. And off screen I cut out more from scrap cardstock of the thank you. And I cut out 3 of each. And here I'm just using Gina K Connect glue in a fine tip bottle. And I'll layer each of the thank yous together, and I'll end up doing the same for the U as well. Now it's really easy to use the glue in a fine tip bottle. It allows you to place the glue in those very thin lines of your sentiment. And there was some very thin lines on this particular sentiment as well. So here we're just doing our 3rd layer. And this also creates some dimension on your card as well. And it does make your sentiment stand out a bit more on your finished card. So if you haven't tried this, I would recommend that you give it a go. And I'm just holding it there with reverse tweezers, which just makes it a lot easier to hold your sentiment and apply the glue, rather than try and hold it in your fingers and risk bending your sentiment. And it's really easy to line up your sentiment layers. It doesn't take much. Once you've got a couple of your your letters lined up, it's really easy to line up the rest. So I'm just pressing that down just to make sure that it's all stuck together. There was a couple of areas that weren't as stuck down as what I thought they were. And then I'm just getting some glue off. So now we'll move on to the U part, and we just go through the same process. So Gina K Connect Glue and glue all the layers together. It was much easier to line up the U than the thank part, but it just depends on how often you do this. I don't actually do this a lot, but it's something that I'll have to do more often. I think it was quite pretty, the end result. Now you could have cut it all out in gold, which I think would have been better, but I don't like wasting my gold cardstock. I'm not sure about you, but you wouldn't have had any of the white underneath peeking through if you don't quite line it up properly. But you also get the white on the side if you look at your card from different angles. Not that it really makes much difference. So here I'm just gluing down our layered cardstock here for the sentiments onto our card. And once we've glued down both the thank you sentiments, then the card is finished. So it's really easy to do this, and I just had to hold it down a little bit because of the embossed card panel underneath, and just to make sure that it was stuck down. And doing the layered die cuts for the sentiment actually made it easier to stick it down to our embossed card panel. So here the card's finished. So I hope you've enjoyed watching this video and seeing how I've made this card. If you have, please make sure that you subscribe to the channel and give the video a big thumbs up. Thank you for watching.